Supernatural Short Stories by Robert Napier. Don't ask me about extraterrestrials. One night I was sitting at my desk guzzling a can of my favorite beverage, Razor. This flavor was called Razorberry. Actually, I had two cans, the other was called Occam Orange, I think. And it was that kind of beverage with just enough caffeine to give the Surgeon General a heart attack. I don't know what else is in these things, but the label purports to keep it simple, so I figure it can't be that bad. Yeah, I'm sitting at my desk drinking said drinks and wondering about the advisability of drinking so much caffeine, especially since it was 4 o'clock in the morning. And now I'm already beginning to suspect it was beginning to have an effect on my sentence length. So, there I sat until by and by I was afflicted with a most strange sort of happenstance. The appearance of two extraterrestrials. They came to my front door in a flush of light with a big whooshing sound. Naturally, I was alarmed, but such was the conventionality of their manner of arrival that I knew immediately that they must be extraterrestrials. And what was I going to do indeed? Call the cops? The fire department? The Orkin man? Besides the obvious late-night interruption, they were genuinely polite. They rang the doorbell and waited patiently for me to gather enough wits to come to the door. I should add, however, that I did not have a doorbell. They went out of their way to have one installed for just such an occasion. I don't mean to detract from their considerate thinking, but I for one have had no use for a doorbell, as so few people come to my door. At any rate, I opened the door, my temerity having lost its debate with my curiosity.
"Good morning,"
said one of the aliens.
"He means good evening,"
corrected the second.
"I do believe I meant good morning,"
recorrected the first.
"The sun isn't up yet,"
reasoned the second.
"Therefore, we say good evening."
"Nevertheless, the temporal codices remain constant regardless of diurnal vagaries,"
said the first, placing a compassionate hand on his comrade's shoulder. A hand which was lovingly scooped into the hand of the second and held there while he explained,
"The temporal codices to which you refer are archaically configured in conjunction with the parochial celestial alignment. Thus, we cannot reasonably address someone formally with the expression, 'Good morning,' until said alignment results in a proverbial sunrise."
And now allow me to apologize, as I have been going on like this and have not explained to you what these aliens actually looked like. You will by now have inferred that they are more or less humanoid in appearance, having hands and mouths and probably appropriate conjunctions between those hands and mouths, and they're tall too. Sorry, I don't mean to bore you with details, but it only just occurred to me how inaccurate the descriptions and artistic representations of the so-called Greys actually are. You see, their heads are rather large by human standards, and this lends itself to diminution of their statures which I find, based on these two, to be unwarranted. And now I'm wondering about the ratio of the number of extraterrestrials to the number of cans of caffeinated beverages. And this is going through my head, while the duo gently debate among themselves on the proper salutation. And that gives me an idea. "Let's just say hello," I say. The two stop debating and look me up and down, and the second one asks,
"What does hello mean?"
Now, I suppose I got rather caught up in this intellectual extraterrestrial framework and promptly replied, "What do you mean, what does it mean?" The first gestured for the second to withdraw momentarily while he tackled this tertiary digression.
"Well, clearly the expression good morning and or evening refers to an actual state of being, or beings in this case, the beings being you, ourselves, and the local environment."
And at this, the second jumps back in.
"Indeed, I forgot. How stupid of me. The sun, of course, is up and at it in some other part of the world."
"Hold on a moment,"
says the first, and the second gives a sour look of reproach.
"But to what state or thing does the term hello refer?"
I scratch my balls a little bit and say, "It doesn't refer categorically to anything. It is simply an audible acknowledgement of one another's mutual presence."
"But I really think I can solve all this,"
interjects the second.
"You see, if the sun is undoubtedly risen somewhere else, we can simply go there in our spaceship and put an end to this senseless debate."
The first appears annoyed now, but smiles, a smile which the second has clearly become accustomed to as a sign of annoyance, which annoys him.
But we may also go somewhere where the light of the sun is irrelevant, or into the very sun itself. Therefore, the locality has nothing to do with the appropriateness of the greeting, except in accordance with the custom of the particular geographical autochthons.
Well, that's obvious,
says the second, and hold on, this is getting cumbersome. From now on, I'll refer to the aliens as, Steve and Steven, just to avoid any confusion. And this debate went on for quite some time as I shivered in the crisp October air blowing in from the bleak, deserted road. So, I shut the door on them. Now you may think this was rude of me, but I think it was rather rude of them to initiate interplanetary diplomacy without getting their facts straight. I reasoned that I would not open the door again until the sun had risen. Nothing much happened until I finally felt pressured to invite them inside. Once we were comfortably seated on and around my sofa, razor refreshments having been offered and declined, Steve said,
"Let's just cut to the chase."
I pointed at him with a grin as I chugged down a premise punch. "The chase?"
"What?"
he asked with what I can only assume acts as a confused grimace in his culture. "You used an idiom very well, sir." Steve and Steven looked back and forth at one another and didn't grin or point, but continued with whatever it was they were saying.
"Here's the situation. You have to decide between two options."
"I don't want to," I replied immediately. "You see, I've never liked making decisions or taking responsibility for anything. It's a policy that I think has worked pretty well so far."
"Well, you haven't got a choice."
"But isn't that exactly what you've asked me for? Now you're saying I haven't got a choice in choosing?"
"You can't choose not to choose. That's not one of the only two choices."
"Says who?" I say.
We do.
"Who are you to say such things?"
"That's not really important."
"You're saying you're not important?"
"Won't you hear us out?"
"Fine, shoot."
Funny you should say that. Here is the choice you're going to have to make. You must burn down an orphanage, or we're going to blow up your entire planet.
I give the pair a sidelong look and pucker my face a bit. I don't get it.
"What's to get?"
I thought that was pretty straightforward, didn't you?
"Indeed."
Indeed.
Why are you going to blow up the world?
If we blow up the world, it's because you didn't burn down an orphanage.
That seems non sequitur to me. I mean, what has blowing up the world got to do with orphanages?
Why don't you let us worry about that?
How can I make an informed decision without all the information? And at this, Steve and Steven chuckled back and forth.
"All the information you say? How could you ever have all the information?"
Of course, I don't mean all the information in the world, but all the information about the choice.
But the choice involves the whole world.
But what about the world leads you to the possible conclusion of blowing it up?
"What does it matter why we would blow up the world? We've made your job quite clear."
Yes, quite clear.
Forgive me for disagreeing, but it does not seem clear to me at all.
"Care to explain where you're having trouble?"
Certainly. Why,
Let me stop you right there.
says Stephen.
Why do you want to know our reasons, except if it were your intention to undermine them? That is to say, you are operating under the pretext that we have not fully exhausted all possible arguments for why or why not to blow up the Earth, with the adjunct of burning or not burning down an orphanage.
That's true, I say, and cough a little to buy some time to think. But you have to understand that it is not an easy decision to make. Therefore, it would help me be more comfortable with the outcome to have explored the syllogism for myself.
But that is your primary mistake, assuming that we are proceeding from some logical standpoint.
Aren't you? I say, and I admit I was put off by this remark.
In what way can we explain to you in what way we are not being logical?
But that's my point, sir, that the choice you've given me is illogical.
Not illogical, sir.
Says Steve, with a dose of disdain.
Unlogical.
Oh, I see, I say, though I don't see. I wish I had more caffeine. But never mind how the choice was designed. I'm interested in why there need be a choice at all.
I think you are trying to trick us. It won't work.
I don't admit I was trying to trick you, but I wonder why you say it wouldn't work if I were.
Because we are far more advanced than you. Culturally, technologically, and as a matter of course, intellectually.
How do you know?
How do we know we are more advanced? I should think it was obvious. Did you notice the spaceship?
And Steve made a whooshing sound while waving his hand around.
We didn't come by trolley.
Fine, I see how you know, but how do I know?
If you see how we know, then you ought to know yourself.
How do you know I'm intellectually capable of knowing what you know I do or do not know?
He's trying to trick us again,
Says Stephen to Steve.
I can tell because he's scratching his balls.
He hopes he can confuse us with language games just because we aren't native speakers.
At this, Stephen looks at me pointedly and says,
Do you know that, strictly speaking, you are not a native speaker either?
I was not aware of that, I answer.
You think language started here?
And Steve chortled and patted Stephen on the back. I never really thought about it.
Well, don't start now. Just make up your mind about the orphanage/world thing.
Do I have to decide right away?
It would really help us out if you could give us an answer today,
Said Steve. Stephen immediately looked out the window to see if it was, in fact, day. Stephen tapped his wrist as though he were wearing a watch and said,
Today, if you please.
Then the clock upon the mantel struck 5 o'clock in the morning.
Frankly,
Began Steve.
I'm shocked at how long this is taking. I mean, does one really need to debate the fate of the world over the fate of a few orphans?
Stephen nods sympathetically. This gives me an idea. But Steve continues without pause.
If one has to debate the notion, then one is at least considering the idea of allowing the world to be blown up. And if that is the case, then what does it matter if the choice is today or 10 years from now? When the world is blown up, it's blown up, and who will care about those 10 years anyway? What will one do in those 10 years that will matter when the world is all gone? What would be the point of life without the tacit understanding that one's efforts will matter?
And Steve looks at me accusingly. I've only just thought of something, I say shyly. Can you tell me whether there needs to be orphans at the orphanage, or if an abandoned orphanage will do?
What are you getting at?
Well, I am wondering whether it is the structure to which you refer, or only mean it as a way of saying orphans in general. Is it the orphans or their habitual residence to which you refer?
To the orphans, sir. I refer to the orphans.
Now he's going to ask what you've got against orphans.
Not at all. I despise the little bastards myself. Only, I wish to know whether I might put an orphan in a box, then remove the orphan and burn the box, and would that count as burning down an orphanage?
I should say it wouldn't.
It must be municipally and civilly recognized as such in order to count, as you say.
But could it be an empty orphanage? Might I evacuate the orphans, and accompanying staff and hangers-on, as it were, from said municipally and civilly recognized establishment, prior to and during the act of burning it down? I feel proud of myself as a short silence ensues. And this has also just occurred to me. You say you want the decision from me now, but might I delay the carrying out of that decision for a time?
Of all the doorbells to ring,
Says Stephen to Steve with contempt.
Look, it's got to be an orphanage full of orphans, got it? And it's got to be done immediately.
Hold on.
Interrupts Steve, who I think is starting to take my side, if only to annoy Stephen.
He has a point. After all, what constitutes an orphanage? The fact that it is municipally and civilly recognized, or the fact that there are orphans in it?
Stephen is angry at first, but you can see he is having second thoughts himself.
Now that you mention it, it is not contrary to lexical semantics that an orphan, properly speaking, be a term applied to any child who has lost a parent. That is, a child may lose only a father, in which case it is not technically incorrect to call the mother, if they were married, a widow, and the child an orphan. In which case, a common household may properly be considered an orphanage, in layman's terms, with or without the municipal or civil recognition. As such, as it were, per se.
Steve scratches his head, and I smile because I've always wondered if aliens itch. Unfortunately, they take this mild expression of revelation as a sign of a belief in intellectual triumph on my part. In response, they renew their solidarity and become increasingly impatient.
I think the issue is clear. However you try to mince words, the fact remains that you've got to immediately decide and carry out one of two distinct options. Either you burn down an orphanage,
And he pauses to peek outside.
Today, or the world is going to be blown up.
Today,
Adds Stephen. I'm beginning to feel uncomfortable. A brisk wind rattled the window panes. I slowly realize that something bad is really going to happen. Today. But, I say, may I ask who it is that is going to blow up the Earth?
We are, of course.
But when you say we, do you mean your whole civilization, or just you two? Steve immediately jumps off the sofa.
Sir, what are you implying?
I think
Stephen says,
he is implying that there are necessarily more than two of us in our civilization.
What?
says Steve.
That's not what he's implying.
I'm sure it is.
Nods Stephen.
Well, he's implying that, but also something else, you dolt.
And I smiled again, because I have also always wondered if aliens insult one another. And now I wonder if there is some existential correlation between itches and insults.
He is insinuating that he may stop us from blowing up the world by force.
You think that's what he was implying?
Says Stephen.
I'm not sure that's what he was implying.
Don't you get it? He was not implying anything about our civilization. That was your inference. He was implying that if only the two of us were going to blow up the world, he may be able to physically stop us from doing so.
You mean he just threatened us? Physically?
Yes.
What makes him think physics has anything to do with it?
It's a very backward civilization where he comes from, you know. They think everything is physics.
Now, gentlemen. Let's not get too excited, I say, trying to calm them down. As it was, I was implying I might stop you physically. After all, you two gentlemen are rather gangly and thin, and your heads, quite a target after all. But I only bring it up as part of an argument, you see, not as an actuality.
What do you mean?
I mean, if it were possible for me to physically or by some other means stop you from your reputed aims, then the choice, as you presented it, was not accurate. That is, there are more than two options, which you, I suspect, purposefully endeavored to keep me ignorant of.
Irregardless of your suspicions, it is of little consequence how many options there actually are. The only options you may choose between are the aforementioned.
That's technically incorrect,
said Steve, holding up a spindly gray finger.
What?
Say Stephen and I simultaneously.
Irregardless.
Irregardless of what?
No, irregardless is not a word.
Of course it's a word, I just said it.
No offense to your integrity or relevance, but just because you use a particular arrangement of phonemes does not de facto make it a word.
But it is a word. I gave you an example sentence.
Sorry to say, but the so-called word you used was a misappropriation of the semiotic icon correctly known as regardless. Irregardless is a superfluous usage of a prefix.
What difference does it make?
Well, none, I suppose. But I thought you should know. In truth, you rather embarrassed me just now in front of our host.
I shrug and frown. Not at all, sir. It would not have occurred to me that irregardless was not a word, lest I later write all of this down and my spell checker objected.
There, you see. Now who's embarrassing whom, eh? And besides, it sounds like he's made a decision.
Wait, I didn't make a decision.
Sounded like you did, you said, lest you write this down later. If there is going to be a later, you're going to have to burn down that damn orphanage.
Stephen turned, his hand clutching the doorknob. That was hypothetical, I quickly declared.
I'm not stupid. I think I would know a hypothetical if one were to occur.
Stephen let go of the doorknob to poke at me with his finger.
But consider this. If you did write it down, you would have just shown to your audience that the world was not blown up, by sheer virtue of them reading this, necessarily by the way, after the fact of your decision. Therefore, it is reasonable to conclude that a decision has already been made, even if you haven't yet made it. And don't give me any bullshit about counter-temporal reasoning. I will eventually already have written the book on the subject.
Steve pulled Stephen aside for a huddle. I don't know what they were saying as I was too distracted by my knee bouncing up and down, clearly a sign of too much caffeine. Presently, they disbanded their sidebar and reinitiated their discourse while clicking on something resembling a smartphone that I had not seen before.
This has gone on long enough,
said Stephen.
We need your decision. Don't worry about what means what. Just pick one so we can all get on with our day.
I hear a faint hum resonating through the roof where, no doubt, they've parked their space saucer. The lamps flicker, and the hairs on my neck begin to tingle. I turn away, rubbing my chin, feigning thoughtfulness, but trying to disguise my rising anxiety.
Ah, Jesus Christ,
exclaims Steve.
What are you thinking about now?
I just wonder what the rush is. You two are from another planet, right?
Yeah, so?
Well, unless I miss my guess, you come from a planet beyond our solar system.
That's true.
So you say the decision needs to be made immediately, and I gather that you two are not acting alone, but as ambassadors of some consortium elsewhere.
That may or may not be true. What of it?
I am concerned then about your perception of simultaneity or immediacy, as it were, on universal scales. That is to say, on whose time frame are we operating? Just for example, if I am meant to burn down an orphanage, but you admit an orphanage is defined by orphans, and that an orphan may be anyone who has lost a parent. You must then also concede that an orphan may be an adult. And, if that's the case, then anyone on Earth who has lost a parent, or will lose a parent, is potentially or presently an orphan, in which case, the entire planet can accurately be referred to as an orphanage. Consequently, the choice you grant me is really no choice at all, but a semantic confusion of terms. Terms which, incidentally, refer to the same thing. From outside, a low, concussive thump travels through the window pane. Somewhere in the distance, a lonely coyote howls. The clock on the mantel ticks louder than ever before.
You misunderstand our aims, however. Namely, the prevention of a certain contagion of reasoning.
Indeed, this is not a semantic argument, but a moral concern, a moral test, as it were, if you will.
But in this case, or perhaps in all cases, a moral conundrum is no more or less than a terminological misappropriation.
Do you really believe that, or are you hoping to make it so, since your obvious predilection, regime of competence, dangles more toward mangling words than deciphering moral phenomenology?
It doesn't make any difference at this point, as it is moral for me to transpose morality into whatever I can, in order to act appropriately in accordance with what I believe it to be.
But surely you realize you cannot dissuade us from our intended aim. Our aim is to do whatever it takes to get you to do whatever you think it will take to dissuade us.
Then I propose a compromise.
We're listening.
Since, as you pointed out, time is really of no particular import, I propose you wait until I die, as I am reasonably sure I will die after at least one of my parents, and then you can cremate my body, as the coffin I inhabit will then be legitimately labeled an orphanage.
But,
Says Steve,
you make many assumptions, first and most obvious that you may die before either parent, and second, that we are willing to wait until said time.
I make no such assumptions, sir. If you reason today is today by virtue of that clock on the mantel, and you have the ability to travel at or near light speed, then you can take that clock with you on your spaceship, travel at or near light speed, and return to Earth today according to that clock, and find my long-deceased body and my long-deceased parents, and burn them. So then, gentlemen, what do you think? Somewhere along that long, lonely, deserted road, where the October wind rattles the windows and coyotes howl, a flying space saucer awaits a long-awaited answer. Levers are pulled. Seams open as the valves shear. There's a series of nearly simultaneous metallic crunches, sharp pops, then the expulsatory hiss of frigid gases tossing vaporous plumes into the rapidly warming ether. A cascade of sounds, tick, crack, gasp, a perfectly choreographed cataclysm, a chain reaction rushing inexorably toward a volatile finale. Zoom out! We are sitting on the roof in lawn chairs. A patio umbrella extends from the space saucer as it hums beside us. Steve, Stephen, and I each crack open a frosty can of Razor and slurp in unison as the sun slowly appears on the horizon. This has been an original short story by Robert Napier. Thank you for listening. Copyright 2012.